There's a common acronym that is used to help explain why the First World War comes out, and it's often described this way: the main cause, if you will, for the First World War. And there seems to be a lot to recommend it, so let's break it down. There's M for militarism. Functionally, the increasing pace of armaments and military buildup among all the powers of Europe, and thus the exceedingly warlike nature of politics and diplomacy at this time period. So militarism driving the forces forward. Secondly is the alliances, the alliance system that we've talked about, the fact that these militaristic powers were being driven into bigger and bigger power blocks. Triple Alliance and the Triple Entente. Then you have I, industrialization, namely this is in many ways related to militarism, such that the tools of war were being developed much more rapidly and were becoming deadlier and more effective and more powerful. Stronger artillery shells that could shoot, stronger artillery pieces that could shoot farther and faster, bigger battleships, improved machine guns, that industrialization was seemingly unlocking a capability of overawing and utterly destroying your enemy. Thus, industrialization seems to be pushing politicians to contemplate war and risk war more readily. And finally, nationalism, the last part of the acronym. The national tensions that are driving nations apart, as well as the national tensions that will lead Serbia to bring about a catalyst that will cause war. So there's a lot to recommend this. It seems to fit, but there is one problem with this acronym. How do they explain why war came in 1914? What do I mean by that? Well, the problem is the main acronym doesn't help you distill down why war came in 1914. I mean, all of the main reasons were there in 1900, in 1905, in 1908, in 1910. Indeed, during any number of crises, the main cause of the First World War was present. Militarism, alliances, industrialization, and nationalism was present in, say, 1905, during a Russian Revolution following their poor performance in the Russo-Japanese War. Why during this time of crisis did general war not come? In 1908, Austria, much to the chagrin of Russia, who thought they had a agreement with them not to do this until a specified period, when Austria goes in and annexes Bosnia-Herzegovina, why doesn't war come then? You have tensions in the Balkans, you have the Eastern question coming up. Why does war not break out then? Why does war not break out when seemingly the Eastern question is being solved by the people on the ground in the Balkans themselves when they rise up in the First and Second Balkan Wars? And so the main acronym is useful, but it doesn't seem to answer the question of why war comes in 1914. And so in explaining the main reason or the main cause for the First World War, we have to be careful to balance both the long-term causes of war as well as the causes specific to 1914. Indeed, to all of those main acronym, we need to add any number of other long-term causes. Those we've talked about before. Pan-Slavism, the Russian interest in the Balkans, German pursuit of Weltpolitik, or world politics, or of a global empire, the solidification of the alliance system in terms of the Triple Alliance and the Triple Entente. All of those are coming together. All of those varied issues are coming together and providing sort of a push of long-term causes that are pushing Europe closer and closer, seemingly, to the brink of war. But you still need a spark. You need something specific to 1914 to set this all off. And so what's the spark that brings about the First World War? The spark will come from one of the powers that emerged out of the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, the Balkan Wars and thereafter, namely Serbia. Serbia desired to, in pure national fashion, pure nationalist fashion, desired to have a nation of its own encompassing all of its national people. The problem was, well, Austria-Hungary. When Austria-Hungary had annexed Bosnia-Herzegovina, they had taken over territory as far as the Serbians were concerned, was theirs. It was their national heritage. It was their Slavic brethren. It's their people that are currently under the thumb of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And so some elements in Serbia, in order to achieve their nationalist aspirations, decided to start fomenting trouble. Members of the Serbian government start funding a terrorist organization known as the Black Hand. And its goal was to assassinate public officials, bomb public facilities, generally cause trouble. The goal was to make the Austrians so annoyed with trying to administer Bosnia-Herzegovina, they would just give up the territory and thus the Serbians would be able to acquire it. And in June of 1914, this terrorist band had a great opportunity. That month, the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, the Archduke Francis Ferdinand, was visiting Sarajevo, the capital of Bosnia-Herzegovina. He was there to visit and inspect troops, and this seemed to be a perfect opportunity for the Black Hand to strike. And the actual assassination of Archduke Francis Ferdinand would be somewhat comical, if not sad, if it wasn't for the horrible outcome of that assassination. The assassins were aware of the route of Archduke Francis Ferdinand. He was in a caravan of cars, and so one of the assassins throws a bomb at his car. He wasn't maybe the best thrower. It bounces off the back of the car, falls behind it, and blows up, damaging the car behind him. Archduke Francis Ferdinand continues on to his next stop. But when he leaves, he decides that he wants to go to the hospital to try and visit those who were injured during his caravan. And so as they're driving back, the driver is unsure where to go and takes a wrong turn down Franz Josef Street. And recognizing this, he slows the car to a stop in order to try and reverse and get back on the right road. But there's a problem. After the bomb had bounced off and exploded, most of the rest of these trained assassins proved fearful and simply scattered to the winds. Some just hid in the crowds, others escaped, and in one case, one assassin, Gavrilo Princip, decided he wanted a sandwich. And so he goes to a delicatessen on Franz Josef Street, and as he's finishing up, he sees a car stop right in front of the delicatessen carrying the Archduke and his wife. Princip steps out, pulls out his pistol, empties it into the car, killing the Archduke and his wife. This assassination sets off a period of diplomatic crises known as the July Crisis, because what happens is the dominoes begin to fall. Austria-Hungary is deeply upset by this, and they want revenge on this troublesome power of Serbia. They want to go to war, they want to crush Serbia, and they want a localized war. The problem is Russia, out of pan-Slavic interest, will not countenance this and is warning Austria to stop. Austria-Hungary, in response, turns to their ally Germany, saying, hey, get Russia to back down. And Russia, in turn, starts turning to France, hoping to apply pressure to Germany. And again, the dominoes fall. But there is a question. Why by August were all of these powers, which had been at peace just months earlier in June, the end of June, how did they so quickly come to decide on war? Well, largely this is due to a commitment by all of them to their war plans. Each one of them believed that they had a war plan that would enable them to gain victory quickly. All of them believed that the war would be over in a short period of time. It wasn't going to be a long, drawn-out conflict. It wasn't going to be something deep and profound. It was going to be a quick conflict like so many other wars, and thus it would be over and the matters would be settled. In the case of Germany, they had one particular plan that they believed would win the war for them quickly. The Schlieffen Plan, which is by far the most famous war plan of World War I, was an attempt, if you will, to solve stupid German diplomacy. Germany had, if you remembered, allowed that reinsurance treaty to lapse, and thus they were faced with the possibility of a two-front war, Russia on one side, France on the other. Schlieffen's plan to try and solve it was to put nearly the entirety of the German army on the front facing France and Belgium, invade through a massive sweeping arc through Belgium into France, defeat the French forces, capture Paris, win the war in a matter of weeks, and then quickly get the German troops back onto trains so they could reach Russia to defeat the Russians. It was a bold plan, if nothing else. But again, all of the powers believe that all of them had plans that would win the war quickly, and thus, when they contemplate war in July, none of them seem to foresee that they're going to face a war, a conflict as grave and as devastating as the one that engulfs Europe in 1914. And indeed, in terms of all of this, they really believe the war will be over quickly. There's a famous speech in which Kaiser Wilhelm II tells the troops that they'll be home before the leaves fall. And so the nations go off to war, Germany initiates the Schlieffen Plan, and they invade Belgium. The problem is this is a foolhardy decision. Not only does it turn world opinion against them, more specifically it turns British opinion against them. Because even at this late date, the British government was deeply divided as to whether or not they were going to join with their allies in the Triple Entente in opposing Germany. It seemed like a war that wasn't in British interests. But with the invasion of Belgium, Britain saw that this desecration, if you will, of a neutral power, the threat of a German hegemony right on the Channel ports near Great Britain could not be countenanced, and they joined the war. Thus, the German assault, rather than making their lives easier, made it infinitely worse with the expansion of the war and the addition of the power of not only Great Britain, but the entire British Empire. With that said, the Schlieffen Plan did seem to be working. In the Battle of the Frontiers, over 400,000 Frenchmen died as the Germans pushed deeper and deeper into French territory. But then, if you will, a miracle occurred. The French spotted a gap growing up in the German lines. At one point, a single army corps of Prussian troops protected the entire flank of the German army. The French and the British quickly sent in reserves to penetrate this gap, and the Germans were checked and forced to retreat. The French, as far as they were concerned, believed this battle to be a miracle which saved Paris. But more than just simply saving Paris, perhaps, and saving the French nation, perhaps, more importantly, it broke the entire purpose of the Schlieffen Plan. The Schlieffen Plan was undone, and the whole reason for that early German offensive was destroyed. The Germans had to respond to this. They retreated back further into French territory, and then they and the Entente forces began a dance, if you will, where each side tried to outflank the other as they moved closer and closer and closer to the English Channel. In the end, they reached the Channel, and no one's victorious. And thus they dig in. Thus the sides begin to dig in. Both sides recognize that they are now stuck where they are with no hope of quick victory, and thus a series of trench lines begin to form down the continent of Europe. Trenches were dug from the English Channel all the way to the border of Switzerland. And for all intents and purposes, that's how the war stays on the Western Front. But it wasn't just that trenches are formed in the mud of Flanders and central France. Trenches would be dug elsewhere in Europe. They would be dug in the Alps. They would be dug along the steppes of Russia. The war would consume all of Europe. All that they had built, all that they had acquired over the previous century, all of this would be unleashed in a grand conflagration. The war would come to encompass most of Europe, extend to the Middle East, to Asia, and across the oceans of the entire globe. But the real problem for the assembled powers was the war did not end quickly. The war continued. The trenches grew. The casualties grew. The war would become a long, horrible, debilitating struggle that would not only kill millions, but topple many of the very empires that gladly marched off to war in August of 1914.